back to the shop. My name is Ben, and today we're going to put the finishing touches on the Moxon Vise, the Benchcrafted Moxon Vise. So what I didn't do when I finished my build video was install the crubber, the cork rubber pad to the inside or the outside face, the movable jaw, and I didn't cut the notches for the clamps. So I was just playing around a little bit. I had it clamped up to the top, and I was cutting with my dovetail saw, practicing that. But what it wouldn't allow me to do is if I had plugged this in here, I wouldn't have been able to like plane across the top of anything, which is a thing that it can do. It's mostly for cutting joinery, but you can also use it to plane smaller stock. And I didn't show when I finished it that I had glued on the tail stabilizer, and this one is more heavy duty than the one specified in the plans. Like it's I don't have, oh man, I broke my primary rule. I don't have a tape measure on this side. But so we've got a jaw, or not a jaw, a tail stabilizer. If I had hold fast in my bench, I could just put hold fast in and clamp to this, and I wouldn't have to have clamps on the front side. The other option is that I could drill through my bench, and then with some of my clamps you can take that off, and then I could slide this up from beneath. And put this back on, and then be able to clamp from there. So that's still a possibility. I might end up doing that as well. But for right now, I want to get these notched down in case I need to clamp to the front. So, that being said, let's disassemble the vise. And then I'm going to do the crubber first. I'm going to use 3M Super 77 spray adhesive because it's awesome. You'll see you spray that on both surfaces. You wait a couple seconds, I think it's like 15 to 30 depending on temperature, for both surfaces to tack up, and then you can apply the crubber, and then we'll clamp it with a flat surface to make sure that that clamps evenly, and then we'll work on cutting the notches on the back jaw. So first step is disassembly, which is pretty easy. I don't need any hand tools. I can just sit here and thread the hand wheel off. Hand wheel, washer, hand wheel, washer. Front jaw slides off. Set that aside, and then take the back nut off. Wiggle that. So now we're disassembled. Let's lay out the lines for cutting the back jaw first. Alright, crubber first. So here we're using the 3M Super 77 spray adhesive. This stuff goes everywhere, so be careful. I also probably use too much. Once you've got an even coat, you need to let the two surfaces tack up for about 15 to 30 seconds. If any transfers to your finger when you touch it, it's still too wet. But if it's tacky, go ahead and put the two surfaces together. Smooth it out as best you can, and then I just use really basic pressure here for a little bit. I wouldn't call that even clamping pressure. Here I don't have an X-Acto knife, so a razor blade and a vice grip does just fine. Now you have to cut out the front holes. Just kind of locate them by pressure and cut them out.
I added a very slight bevel so that the crubber doesn't bind up on the screws when I install it.
Let's lay out the lines for cutting the back jaw first. I need to get my marking gauges. I want these to be on center with my nuts. So really what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set my marking gauge from the bottom to the middle point of the hexagon on that nut. See if I'm still there. Yep. And then I'm just going to scribe a line across. There we go. I'm going to do the same from the other side. And then I'm going to take a look. Oh, that's stuck together. So then I'm going to set my marking gauge to the width of this pad on my clamp. Sure, I have a little bit extra. So what I've done is I've marked the width of the clamp from the ends. That lets me know that I need at least that much space, because I do want to put a little bit of a curve. I don't just want straight cut edges. So I will use probably a 7/8 Forstner bit, or not a Forstner bit, a spade bit here, to clean up that corner. So I don't like the radius of any of my bits, either my Forstner or my 7/8 spade bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the nut as a radius to give me a nice little decorative radius there. And I'll bring you over here to show you how I lay that out. Alright, so we'll take our washer, and you can see here's the space that I need for the clamp, and then I've got this area to put some kind of nice decorative curve into. And what I'm going to do is take this washer, I'm going to bring it to this edge here, and then I'm going to make sure that it lines up with the vertical edge over here, and I'm just going to trace that. So now I know when I go to cut this out on the bandsaw that I come in here and I cut that radius.
Yeah, I definitely should have used the Forstner bit for this. It would have gone a lot smoother. What happened is the first cuts went fine. The right side, this cut you're watching right now, went really smooth. The other side I couldn't get to because I had glued on the tail stabilizer already, and I decided not to lay out the layout lines on the back. I made what cuts I could, but I also ended up dinging the top, and I was real pissed about that. So I missed a whole step of how I ended up cutting it out, and here I am just cleaning up the rest of those curves. There's my unintentional decorative element. This step would have gone a whole lot faster if I had just used the Forstner bit. Also, if I had a good wood rasp and not metal files. This was the first cut, and it actually turned out okay.
Okay, now that the crubber is installed and I've cut out around the edges and I've cut out for the screws, I'm going to put this all back together and use the clamping pressure of the vise itself to finish adhering that, and then I'll come back in and clean up. I'll redo the finish on these edges and then we'll put it to use. I'm not even going to talk about the fact that I bumped the blade and sawed a mark in the top of this. We're just going to pretend like that didn't even happen. So, reinstalling these. Just slide that into the mortise from the front. Take one of the nuts. thread it on from behind and snug it up. There we go. That's quick and that's snug. I'll flip that up so that I can install this. There it goes. And then you drop your 2 washers on. Start your hand wheels. Alright, so this is where, one, it's important to note that this style of clamp is not a parallel face. And so it's probably the most stable way to do this is to clamp from behind. But if I were sawing on this, it would be fine. So, there's the Moxon vise all done and finished. Other than a little bit of finishing. Those are all the steps. I hope you saw it. It's really assembling the screw. Once you chop that mortise on the fixed jaw, and once you chop the oblong mortise through the moving jaw, like putting the actual thing together is really, really simple. Cool.